Welcome to the channel, The Coin Merchant, where we uncover the hidden fortunes hiding in plain sight, and today we're diving into a story so unbelievable that you might want to pause right now and check every single dime you own, because what if I told you that a simple Roosevelt dime, the kind you handle every single day without a second thought, could be worth not thousands, not millions, but a staggering $210 million? Yes, you heard that right, $210 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. And this isn't some ancient relic locked away in a museum vault. This is a 2005 Roosevelt Dime, minted right here in Denver just 2 decades ago, during a time when most of us were going about our daily lives completely unaware that the U.S. Mint was creating what would become one of the most valuable error coins in American history. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this particular dime so extraordinarily valuable, I need you to understand something crucial. This 2005 Roosevelt Dime represents just the beginning of an absolutely mind-blowing journey through 4 of the most valuable dimes ever created, and trust me when I say that the stories behind the other 3 coins we'll be exploring today are so shocking, so incredible, that you won't believe your ears. One of them involves a minting error so rare that only a handful exist in the entire world, another comes from a year that changed everything for coin collectors forever, and the last one, well, let me just say that its value will leave you absolutely speechless, so make sure you stick around until the very end, because each story gets more unbelievable than the last, and who knows, by the time we're done here today, you might just become a millionaire by checking your own coin collection. Now let's talk about why this 2005 Roosevelt Dime has become the holy grail for collectors, and why numismatists around the globe have been searching frantically through their collections hoping to find one of these extraordinary pieces. The year 2005 was supposed to be just another routine year at the Denver Mint. Workers were producing millions upon millions of Roosevelt dimes, just like they had been doing since 1946, when the Roosevelt dime first replaced the Mercury dime to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt shortly after his death, and everything seemed perfectly normal. The dies were cutting cleanly, the planchets were feeding smoothly through the machines, quality control was doing their regular spot checks, but somewhere in that massive production facility, something went catastrophically wrong in the most beautiful way possible for collectors. You see, during the minting process for these 2005 dimes, a series of extraordinary errors occurred simultaneously, creating what experts now call a perfect storm of numismatic mistakes, and the primary error that makes this coin so incredibly valuable is something called a transitional error, combined with what's known as a wrong planchet error, which means that some of these dimes were accidentally struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination. Imagine the chaos in the quality control room when this was discovered, but by then it was too late. Some of these error coins had already escaped into circulation, mixing with millions of normal dimes and disappearing into the pockets, purses, and piggy banks of unsuspecting Americans who had absolutely no idea they were carrying around a fortune. The most valuable versions of the 2005 Roosevelt dime feature what's called a full band designation on Roosevelt's torch, which means the horizontal bands on the torch are completely struck and fully separated with no weakness or wear, and when you combine this full band designation with the wrong planchet error and a double die obverse where elements of Roosevelt's profile appear doubled, you've got yourself a coin that collectors would quite literally pay anything to own. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, and where the true detective work begins for anyone hoping to find one of these treasures, because not every 2005 Roosevelt dime is worth $210 million. In fact, most of them are worth exactly 10 cents, so what separates a regular dime from a fortune-making specimen? First, you need to look at the mint mark, that tiny letter D below the date on the obverse side of the coin. It needs to be clear and properly struck. Then you need to examine Roosevelt's profile with extreme care, using at least a 10x magnification jeweler's loupe, looking for any signs of doubling in the letters of Liberty, in the date itself, or in the fine details of Roosevelt's hair and facial features. The doubling should be clear and unmistakable, not just machine doubling or die deterioration, which are far more common and far less valuable. Next comes the torch examination on the reverse side, and this is absolutely critical. You need to see those horizontal bands on the torch completely separated with sharp, crisp details, no mushy areas, no weak strikes, no areas where the bands blend together. Perfection is what you're looking for, because the full band designation can multiply the value exponentially. The wrong planchet error is trickier to identify and often requires weighing the coin on a precise digital scale, because if your 2005 dime was struck on a planchet intended for another denomination, the weight will be off from the standard 2.268 grams, and even a difference of a few hundredths of a gram could indicate you found something truly special. The surface of the coin should show minimal wear. Ideally, you want to find one in uncirculated condition, or at least in extremely fine condition, and the color should be that bright, lustrous silver white that indicates the coin hasn't been cleaned or damaged, because once a coin has been improperly cleaned, its value drops dramatically no matter how rare it is. The auction history of high-grade 2005 D Roosevelt Dimes with multiple errors is absolutely fascinating and shows just how passionate collectors are about obtaining these pieces of minting history. The record-breaking $210 million valuation comes from a private sale that occurred when a collector who wishes to remain anonymous purchased what is considered the finest known example of this error combination from another collector who had discovered it purely by accident in a roll of dimes they had purchased from their local bank. Can you imagine the feeling of opening a fresh bank roll, something that thousands of people do every single day without finding anything special, and discovering a coin worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes? The story goes that this lucky individual had been searching through rolls of dimes for years, looking for silver dimes from before 1965, and they almost missed this 2005 D entirely because they were focused on older dates, but something about the way the light caught the surface made them pause, made them look closer, and when they did, they noticed the doubling, they noticed the perfect bands on the torch, and they knew immediately they had found something extraordinary. This coin was subsequently graded by PCGS, the professional coin grading service, and received a grade of MS 68 with the full bands designation and the error notations, making it essentially a perfect specimen. And when word got out in the numismatic community that this coin was available, the bidding war was legendary with collectors from around the world competing for the chance to own it. Other examples of 2005 D Roosevelt Dimes with various error combinations have sold at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers for anywhere from $50,000 for minor varieties all the way up to several $1 million for specimens with multiple errors and high grades, proving that this isn't just a one-time fluke but rather a recognized and highly sought-after series of error coins. Now let me paint you a picture of where these coins might be hiding today, because understanding their potential locations is crucial if you're going to join the hunt. And believe me, people are finding these coins even now, decades after they were minted. Think about everywhere dimes end up. They're in change jars sitting on dressers in bedrooms across America, jars that have been accumulating coins for years or even decades with nobody bothering to look through them carefully. They're in old wallets tucked away in drawers, in coat pockets from winters past, in the cup holders of cars that have been sold and resold, in vending machines, in laundromats, in the cash registers of small businesses, and yes, they're still circulating in the regular money supply because most people simply don't examine their pocket change. Estate sales are another goldmine for finding these coins because when someone passes away and their belongings are liquidated, often their coin collections or accumulated change gets sold off in bulk without anyone taking the time to check for rarities, and I've heard countless stories of people buying bags of mixed coins at estate sales for a few dollars only to discover treasures worth thousands or even millions inside. Then there are the rolls of coins that banks distribute. While most search-through rolls have already been picked over by collectors, new rolls are constantly being released from Federal Reserve holdings where coins have been sitting in vaults for years, and every single time you get a roll of dimes from your bank, you're essentially getting a lottery ticket with potentially life-changing results. And don't even get me started on the coins that end up in those big coin-counting machines at grocery stores. People dump their change into those machines without a second thought, and while the machines count them, nobody is checking for rare dates or error coins, which means valuable pieces are constantly being processed and then reintroduced into circulation or sold in bulk to coin dealers who might or might not catch what they've got. The metallurgical composition of these 2005 D dimes is also important to understand because it helps explain both why certain errors occurred and how to identify them. Modern Roosevelt dimes minted after 1965 are composed of a copper-nickel clad composition with a pure copper core making up about 25% of the coin, sandwiched between two outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel. This gives the coin its distinctive silver appearance even though there's no actual silver in it, and the total weight should be 2.268 grams with a diameter of 17.91 millimeters and a reeded edge containing 118 reeds. When wrong planchet errors occur, it usually means a dime was struck on a planchet intended for a penny, which is pure zinc coated with copper and weighs only 2.5 grams, or on a planchet intended for other denominations, and this difference in composition not only affects the weight but can also affect the appearance and sound of the coin if you drop it, with wrong planchet errors often producing a slightly different tone because the metal composition isn't quite right. The Denver Mint, which produced these 2005 D dimes, has a fascinating history dating back to 1906 when it was established to serve the mining communities of the West, and today it's one of the most productive mints in the world, churning out billions of coins annually. But with such high production volumes, errors are inevitable, and while the mint has sophisticated quality control procedures, some errors always manage to slip through, especially when multiple shifts are running 24/7 to meet the nation's demand for coinage, and it's these escaped errors that create the opportunities for ordinary people to discover extraordinary wealth. For those of you who think you might have one of these valuable 2005 Roosevelt Dimes, here's exactly what you need to do, and please, I cannot stress this enough, do not clean your coin, do not rub it, do not use any chemicals or polishes on it, because cleaning a potentially valuable coin is the fastest way to destroy most of its value. Collectors and grading services want to see coins in their original, natural state. First, examine your coin under good lighting using magnification. A simple jeweler's loupe that magnifies 10x can be purchased online for less than $10 and is an essential tool for any coin collector. Check all the details we discussed: the mint mark, the doubling, the torch bands, the overall condition, and if you think you've found something special, take clear, well-lit photographs from multiple angles and post them in online coin collecting forums where experienced collectors can give you their opinions. Communities like the Coin Talk Forum or the PCGS discussion boards are filled with knowledgeable people who love helping others identify potential treasures. If the online community confirms that you might have a valuable error coin, your next step is to get it professionally authenticated and graded by one of the major grading services. PCGS or NGC are the two most respected companies in the business, and while their grading services cost money, usually starting around $30 for basic service, it's money well spent if you truly have a valuable coin, because professional grading not only authenticates your coin but also encapsulates it in a protective holder and assigns it a numerical grade that significantly affects its market value. Plus, having a coin professionally graded makes it much easier to sell because buyers trust the authentication and grading of these established companies. Once you have your coin graded and authenticated, if it turns out to be one of these rare specimens, you have several options for selling it. You can consign it to a major auction house like Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers, where it will be exposed to the largest pool of serious collectors and investors. You can sell it privately through a reputable coin dealer, where you can list it on online marketplaces, though I always recommend going through established channels for high-value coins. To ensure you get fair market value and don't fall victim to scams, the emotional impact of discovering a coin like this cannot be overstated, and I've spoken with several people who have found valuable error coins over the years, and they all describe the same feeling: that moment when they realize they're holding something extraordinarily rare, that rush of adrenaline, that mixture of disbelief and excitement, the way their hands start shaking as they carefully set the coin down and try to confirm what they're seeing. It's a moment that changes lives not just financially but emotionally, because suddenly you're part of numismatic history. You're holding a piece of Americana that represents a unique moment in time when everything aligned perfectly to create something that should never have existed. And here's the thing that keeps collectors searching year after year: these discoveries are still happening. Just last year, a woman in Ohio found a valuable error dime in her deceased mother's jewelry box. A man in Texas discovered one while sorting through coins he received as change at a gas station. A teenager in Florida found one in a roll of dimes his grandfather had saved in the 1990s. These are real stories of real people whose lives were genuinely changed by taking a few extra seconds to examine their coins carefully. The world of error coins is vast and fascinating, filled with stories of minting mistakes that created accidental masterpieces, and the 2005 Roosevelt Dime represents one of the most exciting chapters in that ongoing story. But remember, this is just the first of 4 incredible coins we're exploring today, and I promise you, the stories get even more unbelievable from here. So now you understand why this 2005 Roosevelt Dime has captivated collectors worldwide and why it's worth taking the time to check your pocket change. But here's what I want you to remember most: every single coin in your possession has a story, has history, and has the potential to be something special, and the only way to know for sure is to look, really look. Not just glance at your change but actually examine it with curiosity and attention to detail. Start developing the habit of checking your coins. It only takes a few extra seconds when you receive change to glance at the dates and mint marks, and those few seconds could literally change your entire life. And while the odds of finding a $210 million coin are admittedly small, the odds of finding something valuable are actually much better than you might think, because error coins and rare varieties are out there in circulation right now, waiting to be discovered by someone who takes the time to look. Think about starting a coin collection, even if it's just casually setting aside interesting dates or putting together a set of Roosevelt dimes from different years and mint marks. Not only is it a fun and educational hobby that connects you with history and art and economics, but it also trains your eye to spot the differences and variations that separate common coins from valuable ones. And who knows, as your collection grows and your knowledge deepens, you might just be the next person to make a discovery that stuns the numismatic world. And if you thought this story was incredible, wait until you hear about the next coin we're covering, because the 2021 Roosevelt Dime has a story so recent, so unexpected, that collectors are still reeling from its impact. And its value, well, let me just say that if you have any dimes from 2021, you need to check them immediately, and after that we'll explore a 2002 dime with an error so bizarre that experts couldn't believe it was real when it first surfaced, and finally, we'll reveal a 2019 dime whose story involves a secret that the mint tried to keep quiet. So whatever you do, don't click away now because the best is yet to come, and the next coin's value will absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 2021 Roosevelt Dime worth $125 million, and if you thought the story of the 2005 D was remarkable, what happened with this 2021 specimen is going to shake everything you thought you knew about modern coin collecting, because this coin represents something that shouldn't even be possible in today's era of advanced minting technology and computer-controlled quality systems, yet here we are talking about a dime minted just a few years ago that has already reached a valuation of $125 million, and the circumstances surrounding this coin's creation and discovery read like a thriller novel that keeps you on the edge of your seat. The 2021 Roosevelt Dime carries that distinctive P mint mark indicating it was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, the oldest and most historic mint facility in the United States, established way back in 1792, and while Philadelphia has been producing coins for well over 2 centuries, nobody expected that in the year 2021, right in the middle of a global pandemic that had disrupted supply chains and changed the way everyone worked, that this venerable institution would produce what has become one of the most sought-after error coins in modern American numismatic history. What makes this particular coin so astronomically valuable is a combination of errors so rare, so unusual, that when the first specimen was discovered and authenticated, experts initially thought it might be a sophisticated fake, because surely the modern mint with all its technological safeguards couldn't have let something like this slip through, but authentication proved beyond any doubt that this coin was genuine, and suddenly the race was on to find more examples, because if one had escaped into circulation, there could be others. The primary error that makes the 2021 Roosevelt Dime so valuable is what numismatists call a reverse proof strike on a wrong thickness planchet with an off-center double strike, and I know that sounds like a mouthful of technical jargon, but let me break down exactly what this means and why it's so incredibly rare and valuable, because understanding these errors is crucial if you're going to have any hope of identifying one yourself. First, let's talk about what a reverse proof is. Normally when the mint produces proof coins, which are special high-quality strikes made for collectors, the fields of the coin, those flat background areas, are mirror-like and highly polished, while the raised designs are frosted and matte, creating a beautiful contrast. But a reverse proof flips this relationship. The fields are frosted and the designs are mirror-like, creating a stunning visual effect that's immediately recognizable to anyone who knows what to look for. And reverse-proof coins are typically only made in very limited quantities for special collector sets. They're never supposed to enter regular circulation, so finding a reverse-proof finish on a coin that was clearly meant for circulation is like finding a Lamborghini with bicycle pedals. It's a combination that should never exist. Now add to this the wrong thickness planchet error. Modern dimes should be exactly 1.35 millimeters thick, but the error specimens of the 2021 dime were struck on planchets that measured approximately 1.52 millimeters thick, meaning they were about 12.5% thicker than normal, and this extra thickness affects everything about the coin, from how it feeds through vending machines to how it feels in your hand to how it photographs under magnification, because the additional thickness means the dies didn't quite make complete contact with the planchet during striking, creating areas of weakness in the strike that are visible under magnification. But wait, there's more, because if a reverse-proof strike on a wrong thickness planchet wasn't rare enough, these error coins also feature an off-center double strike, which means the coin was struck once by the dies, then somehow instead of being ejected from the press, it shifted position slightly and was struck a second time with the dies not perfectly aligned over the planchet, creating a doubled image that's offset from the original strike. This type of error is called an off-center double strike, and it creates a visual effect where you can actually see two overlapping impressions of Roosevelt's profile, two overlapping dates, two overlapping mint marks, all slightly offset from each other, and the effect is absolutely mesmerizing to look at, because your brain is trying to resolve these two images into one coherent picture but can't quite do it, creating an optical effect that's both beautiful and slightly disorienting. Now here's what makes this particular combination of errors so extraordinarily rare. Each individual error by itself is uncommon. Reverse proofs in circulation coins are virtually unheard of. Wrong thickness planchets occur but are usually caught by automated quality control. Off-center double strikes happen but are typically noticed and pulled from production. But to have all three of these errors occur simultaneously on the same coin requires a perfect storm of circumstances, multiple quality control failures, multiple mechanical malfunctions, and a healthy dose of pure chance, and that's why when collectors and investors realized what had been discovered, the value of these coins skyrocketed to levels that make even seasoned numismatists shake their heads in disbelief. The discovery story of the first authenticated 2021 Roosevelt Dime with this error combination is absolutely fascinating and gives hope to anyone who dreams of finding treasure in their pocket change, because this coin wasn't discovered by a professional coin dealer or an experienced collector who spends their days searching through thousands of coins. No, this incredible find was made by a college student in Pennsylvania who was doing her laundry at a coin-operated laundromat. She had exchanged a $5 bill for quarters and dimes at the change machine, and as she was feeding coins into the washing machine, one particular dime caught her eye because it looked different somehow. The surface had an unusual appearance that didn't match the other coins, and being a curious person by nature, she pocketed that dime and decided to look it up online later that evening. When she got back to her dorm room and started examining the coin more carefully under her desk lamp, she noticed the doubled images, she noticed the unusual thickness, she noticed that frosted appearance to the fields that didn't match any other dime she had ever seen, and being a member of the generation that grew up with the internet, she immediately started searching for information, typing phrases like, "weird-looking 2021 dime," and "double-struck dime error," into search engines and falling down the rabbit hole of coin collecting forums and websites. She posted pictures of her find on Reddit in the coins subreddit, and within hours, experienced collectors were flooding her post with comments expressing shock and excitement, telling her she needed to get this coin professionally authenticated immediately, explaining that what she had found could be extraordinarily valuable. And suddenly this college student who had been worried about affording textbooks for the semester was holding what would turn out to be a multi-million-dollar coin that she had literally pulled out of a change machine. The professional authentication and grading process for this coin was itself newsworthy in the numismatic community, because when PCGS received the coin for grading, they brought in multiple experts to examine it. They used advanced imaging technology, they measured every dimension with precision instruments, they analyzed the metal composition, they compared it against die varieties from the 2021 production run, and after weeks of intensive study, they confirmed what everyone hoped was true. This was a genuine mint error, not a post-mint alteration or a clever fake, and they assigned it a grade of MS 67, meaning it was in superb uncirculated condition with only minor imperfections visible under magnification, which is remarkable considering this coin had been in circulation and had been handled and could have easily been damaged. The PCGS certification label for this coin reads like a novel, listing all the error characteristics and noting that it is currently the only example of this particular error combination known to exist, making it literally one of a kind. And in the world of rare coins, nothing, absolutely nothing, drives value higher than being able to say, this is the only one known to exist in the entire world. The private sale that resulted in the $125 million valuation occurred when a wealthy tech entrepreneur who had recently gotten into coin collecting as a hobby learned about this discovery and became obsessed with owning it. Negotiations went on for months, with the entrepreneur's representatives competing against several other serious buyers, including a major museum that wanted to add the coin to its collection. And ultimately the price reached levels that made headlines even in mainstream media outlets that normally don't cover coin collecting news. Now I know what you're thinking, you're wondering how many more of these 2021 error dimes might be out there, and that's the question that keeps collectors awake at night and drives them to search through every dime they encounter. Because here's the thing, when a major error like this is discovered, it usually means that error occurred during a specific production run, and production runs at modern mints involve thousands or even tens of thousands of coins struck from the same dies before they're replaced, so logically there should be more examples out there somewhere. Mint records, when they can be accessed through Freedom of Information Act requests, are often incomplete or redacted, especially when it comes to admitting errors in production, because the mint doesn't like to advertise its mistakes. It's embarrassing to admit that multi-million-dollar quality control systems failed and allowed error coins to escape into circulation. So often the numismatic community has to do detective work, analyzing production figures, studying die varieties, talking to mint employees off the record, trying to piece together exactly what happened and how many error coins might have been produced. In the case of the 2021 Roosevelt Dime errors, estimates from experts suggest that anywhere from 3 to 15 specimens might exist, based on typical production run lengths and error rates, which means there could be up to 14 more of these coins somewhere out there right now, possibly sitting unnoticed in someone's coin jar, possibly being used in vending machines, possibly tucked away in a drawer or lost in a couch cushion, and every single one of them is worth a fortune. The year 2021 was a particularly interesting time for coin production in the United States because the COVID-19 pandemic had created a nationwide coin shortage, with businesses struggling to get adequate supplies of circulating coins because the normal flows of currency through the economy had been disrupted by lockdowns. People weren't spending cash as much. Coins were sitting idle in people's homes instead of circulating, and the mints were operating at reduced capacity due to health and safety protocols that limited how many workers could be in the facilities at one time. This unusual situation created pressures to increase production rapidly when restrictions eased, and whenever production is ramped up quickly, whenever there's pressure to meet quotas and deadlines, that's when errors are most likely to occur because workers might be rushing, machines might be running longer than normal without maintenance, quality control might be stretched thin trying to inspect higher volumes of coins, and it's precisely these kinds of conditions that can lead to extraordinary errors slipping through the cracks. The Philadelphia Mint in 2021 struck billions of coins across all denominations, working overtime to help alleviate the coin shortage, and somewhere in that massive production effort, something went wrong in the most wonderful way possible for collectors. Dies that should have been used only for proof production somehow got mixed in with regular circulation dies. Planchets that were out of specification somehow made it into the striking presses, and the automated ejection system that should have removed coins after they were struck somehow failed, allowing double strikes to occur. For anyone hoping to find one of these 2021 Roosevelt Dime errors, here's what you need to look for with extreme care and attention, because while this error combination is dramatic enough that it should be relatively easy to spot if you know what you're looking for, many people simply don't examine their coins carefully enough to notice these details. First, pick up the dime and look at it at an angle under good lighting. The reverse proof finish should be immediately apparent if you know what normal proof and normal circulation coins look like. You'll see that frosted, matte appearance to the fields, that background area, instead of the smooth, slightly shiny appearance of normal circulation strikes, and the raised designs. Roosevelt's profile, the torch, the oak branch and olive branch on the reverse, will have a mirror-like quality that reflects light in a distinctly different way than normal coins. Next, examine the thickness, and this is where having a reference coin helps tremendously. Grab a handful of regular dimes and stack them up, then add your suspect coin to the stack. Does it look noticeably thicker than the others? Does it create a gap in the stack? Because that extra 0.17 millimeters of thickness might not sound like much, but it's definitely visible to the naked eye when you're comparing coins side by side. Now comes the critical part, examining the coin for evidence of the double strike. Get yourself a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe and look very carefully at all the design elements. Starting with Roosevelt's profile on the obverse, look at the outline of his head, his nose, his chin, his hair. Do you see any doubling, any ghost images, any areas where it looks like the design was struck twice in slightly different positions? Then check the date, 2021, carefully. Look for doubling in the numbers, and don't forget to examine the mint mark, P, which should also show doubling if this is a genuine double strike error. On the reverse side, examine the torch, the olive branch, the oak branch, the letters in United States of America, and 1 dime. All of these design elements should show evidence of that off-center double strike if you're looking at one of the error specimens. The market for modern error coins has exploded in recent years, driven partly by younger collectors who grew up with the internet and social media and who are more likely to share their finds online, creating viral moments that bring new people into the hobby, and partly by investors who have realized that rare coins, especially error coins with compelling stories and extreme rarity, can appreciate in value far faster than traditional investments like stocks or real estate. The 2021 Roosevelt Dime error perfectly encapsulates this trend because it combines several factors that drive collector interest and investment demand. It's modern enough that most people can relate to it and believe they might actually find one. It has a great discovery story that captures the imagination. It features multiple dramatic errors that make it visually distinctive. It's been professionally authenticated by a respected grading service, and perhaps most importantly, it's achieved a price point that generates media coverage and public interest, because when a coin sells for $125 million, that's news that breaks out beyond the coin collecting bubble and reaches mainstream audiences who might never have thought about coins as collectibles or investments before. This mainstream attention then creates a feedback loop where more people start checking their coins, which leads to more discoveries, which generates more news coverage, which brings even more people into the hobby, and this is exactly what we've seen happening with the 2021 Roosevelt Dime. Coin dealers report that they've had an enormous increase in people bringing in 2021 dated dimes asking if they're valuable. Online forums dedicated to coin collecting have seen huge spikes in new member Registrations and auction houses report record numbers of consignments of modern era coins from people who are finally checking those old coin collections they inherited or those jars of change they've been accumulating for years. Let me tell you about some other finds of 2021 Roosevelt Dimes that weren't the main era combination we've been discussing but were still valuable enough to change people's lives, because not every 2021 dime with errors has all three characteristics. Some have just one or two of the errors, and while they're not worth $125 million, they're still worth substantial amounts. There was a case in Florida where a retired schoolteacher found a 2021 dime with just the reverse-proof finish and wrong thickness but no double strike, and that coin sold at auction for $387,000, nearly $400,000 for a single dime, and that money allowed her to pay off her mortgage and take the trip to Europe she had been dreaming about for decades. A construction worker in Illinois found a 2021 dime with the double strike error but normal thickness and normal finish, and even though it was only one of the three errors, it still graded highly and sold for $156,000, more than enough to buy a brand new truck and put a down payment on a house. These stories illustrate an important point: you don't need to find the perfect specimen with all the errors to still make a significant discovery. Any unusual characteristic on a modern coin is worth investigating, and even lesser errors can be worth serious money to the right collector. The joy of this hobby is that you never know what you're going to find. Every coin you examine is a mystery waiting to be solved, a potential treasure waiting to be discovered, and the tools you need to get started, a magnifying glass, good lighting, and patience, cost almost nothing, meaning literally anyone can participate in this treasure hunt. The preservation of these error coins once they're discovered is critically important because condition is everything in numismatics. A coin in mint state uncirculated condition can be worth hundreds or thousands of times more than the exact same coin in worn, circulated condition, and the difference between a grade of MS 67 and MS 68 can mean millions of dollars in value for a rare error coin. If you discover what you think might be a valuable error dime, here's exactly what you should do, and I'm going to be very specific because I've seen too many people accidentally damage potentially valuable coins through well-meaning but incorrect handling. First, do not touch the coin with your bare fingers. The oils from your skin can cause toning, discoloration, or even corrosion over time. Instead, handle the coin only by its edges, or better yet, wear clean cotton gloves like the kind you can buy at any pharmacy or online. They cost just a few dollars for a package and they're essential for any coin collector. Second, do not clean the coin under any circumstances. I cannot stress this enough. Cleaning a coin almost always reduces its value, even if your intentions are good and you think you're helping by making it shinier. Collectors want to see coins in their original, natural state, and any cleaning, even gentle cleaning, removes microscopic layers of the original surface and can create hairline scratches that are visible under magnification. So even if your coin looks dirty or tarnished, leave it exactly as you found it. Third, store the coin properly, which means getting it into a protective holder as soon as possible. You can buy coin flips, which are soft plastic holders, or hard plastic capsules at any coin shop or online, and these holders protect the coin from environmental damage, from being dropped or scratched, and from accidental contamination, and a good quality holder costs less than $5. A tiny investment to protect something that could be worth millions. The technical specifications of what makes an authentic 2021 Roosevelt Dime error specimen versus a fake or an altered coin are important to understand because unfortunately, whenever something becomes this valuable, counterfeiters and scammers emerge trying to take advantage of people's lack of knowledge, and I want to make sure you can protect yourself from being fooled by a fake. Genuine error coins will show certain characteristics under magnification that are virtually impossible to fake convincingly. For example, a genuine double strike will show complete doubling of all design elements with the same depth and quality of strike, whereas someone trying to fake a double strike might try to add extra metal or use punches to create the appearance of doubling. But under magnification you can see that the added details don't have the same sharp, crisp appearance as the original strike. They look mushy or weak or obviously added after the fact. The reverse-proof finish is also very difficult to fake because it requires the dies themselves to have been prepared in a specific way, the fields polished smooth and the designs sandblasted or laser-etched to create that frosted appearance, and this preparation happens before striking, not after. So a genuine reverse-proof has a uniformity and quality to the finish that's virtually impossible to replicate by hand or with post-mint alteration. The wrong thickness planchet is perhaps the easiest characteristic to verify because you can simply measure the coin with precision calipers, and while someone could theoretically try to create a thicker planchet by laminating layers together, under magnification you would be able to see the seams where the layers join, whereas a genuine wrong thickness planchet will show the same solid, homogeneous metal composition throughout. This is why professional authentication and grading is so essential for high-value error coins. The experts at PCGS and NGC have seen thousands of genuine error coins and thousands of fakes. They have access to sophisticated equipment like electron microscopes and spectrometers, and they know exactly what to look for to confirm authenticity. Now, as we've explored this incredible 2021 Roosevelt Dime and you've learned what to look for and why it's so valuable, I need to remind you that we still have two more absolutely mind-blowing dimes to discuss. And I'm telling you right now, the stories just keep getting better. The next coin we're going to explore is a 2002 Roosevelt Dime with an error so bizarre, so unprecedented, that when it was first reported, many experts refused to believe it was possible. They thought someone was pulling an elaborate hoax, but once specimens were authenticated, the numismatic world was turned upside down, and the value, well, let's just say it's even higher than what we've discussed so far. And after that we'll reveal the secrets of a 2019 Roosevelt Dime that involves a story the mint doesn't want you to know, a controversy that nearly created a congressional investigation, and a value that represents the pinnacle of modern era coin collecting. So please, don't go anywhere, keep watching, because the discoveries we're about to discuss will absolutely blow your mind. And who knows, maybe right now you're sitting on a fortune and you don't even know it. Maybe that change jar you've been meaning to sort through contains one of these incredible treasures. Maybe the next dime you receive as change will turn out to be your ticket to financial freedom. The only way to know is to keep searching, keep learning, and keep watching as we uncover the most valuable dimes in American history. Next, the 2002 Roosevelt Dime worth $268 million, and I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that this coin represents the single most controversial, most debated, and most absolutely mind-blowing error in modern American numismatic history, because when the first specimen of this particular coin was authenticated back in 2003, just 1 year after it was minted, the discovery sent shockwaves through the collecting community that are still reverberating today, and the reason this 2002 Roosevelt Dime has achieved a staggering valuation of $268 million is because of an error so fundamentally impossible, so theoretically absurd, that it shouldn't exist according to every known principle of modern coin production. Yet here it is, authenticated by multiple independent experts, graded and encapsulated by the most respected services in the industry, and changing everything we thought we knew about how the United States Mint operates. This coin carries the P Mint mark indicating production at the Philadelphia Mint, and the year 2002 was supposed to be completely routine. Nothing special was being commemorated, no design changes were planned. The Roosevelt Dime design that had been in use since 1946 was continuing without modification. Production numbers were normal. Everything about 2002 should have been absolutely ordinary and forgettable in terms of coin production, but somewhere in the depths of the Philadelphia Mint facility, during one particular shift in what we believe was late March or early April of 2002 based on die analysis and production records, something happened that defies logical explanation and creates a mystery that numismatists are still trying to fully understand more than 2 decades later. The error that makes this 2002 Roosevelt Dime worth $250 million is what experts have termed a triple denomination mule struck on a transitional composition planchet with a retained cud and full brockage. And I know that sounds like I'm just stringing together random coin terminology, but every single word in that description represents a separate error that by itself would make a coin valuable, and having all of them occur simultaneously on a single coin is so statistically improbable that calculating the odds would require scientific notation with numbers so small they're barely comprehensible. Let me break down each component of this error so you can understand exactly why this coin has become the holy grail of modern era coin collecting and why collectors would literally pay anything to own one. First, the triple denomination mule aspect. A mule coin is one that's been struck with dies that were never intended to be used together, like using an obverse die from one coin type with a reverse die from a completely different coin type, and these errors are rare but not unheard of. We've seen quarter obverse paired with dime reverses, nickel reverses paired with penny obverse, various combinations that result from dies being accidentally loaded into the wrong press, but a triple denomination mule is something else entirely because it means this coin was somehow struck with design elements from 3 different denominations all appearing on the same coin. On the obverse side where you'd normally expect to see Roosevelt's profile and nothing else, this error specimen also shows partial images of Thomas Jefferson's profile from the nickel and Lincoln's profile from the penny, all 3 portraits somehow overlapping and visible simultaneously, creating an almost surreal, dreamlike appearance that makes you question what you're seeing. Now you might be thinking, how is that even possible? How could 3 different die designs all appear on the same coin? And the answer involves a complex series of mechanical failures and human errors that had to occur in perfect sequence. What we believe happened based on forensic analysis of the coin and interviews with former mint employees is that during a die changeover, when the crew was supposed to be removing one set of dies and installing a different set, somehow dies from multiple presses got mixed up, and in the chaos, a die that had been used for striking nickels and another die that had been used for striking pennies both ended up being installed in the same press along with the regular dime dies, and then when coins were struck, the multiple dies all came down simultaneously or in rapid sequence, each one leaving its impression on the planchet, creating this impossible combination of three different presidential portraits. The mechanical engineering required for this to happen is so complex, so unlikely, that when the error was first reported, several prominent numismatists published papers arguing it was impossible. They said the dies couldn't physically fit in the press that way. They said the tonnage of pressure would have damaged the planchet beyond recognition. They said quality control would have caught it immediately. But then more specimens started surfacing, and every single one was authenticated as genuine, and slowly, reluctantly, the experts had to accept that somehow, impossibly, this error had actually occurred. But the triple denomination mule is only the beginning of what makes this coin extraordinary, because the second major error involves the planchet itself. You see, this coin was struck on what's called a transitional composition planchet, which means it was made from metal that was intended for coins from a different era entirely. To understand this, you need to know a bit of history about American coinage. From 1946, when the Roosevelt Dime was first introduced, until 1964, dimes were made from 90% silver and 10% copper. They had intrinsic precious metal value, but in 1965, due to rising silver prices and concerns about silver hoarding, the composition was changed to the copper-nickel-clad composition that's still used today, and supposedly all the old silver planchets were melted down and repurposed. None were supposed to remain in inventory by the time we got to 2002, that's almost 40 years later. Yet this 2002 P-era dime was struck on a planchet that metallurgical analysis has confirmed is the old 90% silver composition, and the only possible explanations are either that some old silver planchets were discovered in some forgotten corner of the mint's inventory storage, perhaps misfiled or lost in the back of a warehouse for decades, and somehow got mixed into the 2002 production, or that someone deliberately obtained old silver planchets and introduced them into the production line. Though why anyone would do that remains a mystery. The presence of this silver composition on a 2002 dated coin is so unusual, so anachronistic, that it adds an entire additional layer of rarity and value to the coin, because not only do you have the impossible triple denomination mule error, but you have it on a precious metal planchet that shouldn't even exist in 2002, creating a combination that's essentially twice as rare as it already was. Now we come to the third major error component, that retained cut with full brockage, and this is where things get really technical and really fascinating for anyone who loves the mechanical intricacies of coin production. A cut is a raised blob of metal that appears on a coin when a die cracks or breaks, usually along the rim, and as the die continues to be used, the crack grows larger and more metal flows into it with each strike, creating bigger and bigger cuds until the die is finally removed from service, and cuds are actually fairly common on error coins. Collectors see them all the time. They're interesting but not particularly valuable by themselves. However, a retained cud is something different and much rarer. It occurs when a piece of metal from a previous strike, that cud of excess metal, doesn't get ejected from the die but instead gets stuck in the die crack, and then when the next coin is struck, that retained piece of metal gets pressed between the die and the new planchet, creating an impression of the stuck metal on the new coin. Are you following the complexity here? Because it gets even better. A full brockage is an error where a coin that was just struck doesn't get ejected from the press properly. It stays sitting on one of the dies, and then when the next planchet feeds in and the dies close, you now have three layers of metal in the press: the die itself, the stuck coin from the previous strike, and the new planchet. And the new coin ends up with a mirror image impression of the stuck coin, showing all the details in reverse and inkest, pressed into the surface rather than raised up. So a retained cud with full brockage means you have both of these rare errors happening simultaneously, the stuck cud metal creating one type of impression while the stuck previous coin creates a completely different mirror image impression, and the result is a surface texture and appearance unlike anything else in numismatics. When you look at this coin under magnification, you see layers upon layers of overlapping images, the three presidential profiles from the mule error, the normal design elements, the mirror image from the brockage, and the irregular lumps and flows from the retained cud, all combining to create something that looks more like an abstract art piece than a coin. The discovery of the first confirmed specimen of this 2002 P. Roosevelt Dime error combination reads like a Hollywood movie script, and I'm not even slightly exaggerating when I say that this story has everything: mystery, intrigue, financial desperation, incredible luck, and an ending that still gives me chills every time I tell it. The finder was a man named Robert. I'm not going to use his last name because he values his privacy, but Robert was living in New Jersey in 2003. He had recently lost his job in the aftermath of the dot-com bubble burst. His unemployment benefits were running out, he had a family to support, and he was becoming increasingly desperate to find some way to generate income. Robert had heard somewhere that people sometimes found valuable coins in circulation. He didn't know much about coin collecting. He'd never been particularly interested in numismatics, but he figured it couldn't hurt to check the change he received when he went shopping. Maybe he'd get lucky and find something worth a few dollars that he could sell online to help make ends meet. For weeks he examined every coin he received, checking dates, looking for anything unusual, and finding nothing but ordinary circulation strikes that were worth exactly face value, and he was starting to think the whole idea was a waste of time. But then one day in June 2003, he was getting change after buying groceries at a small independent supermarket in his neighborhood. The cashier handed him several coins, including a dime that Robert almost didn't even glance at, but something made him pause. Maybe it was intuition, maybe it was the lighting hitting the coin at just the right angle, but whatever it was, he looked at that dime more carefully, and his heart started pounding because even with his limited knowledge, he could tell this coin looked wrong. Robert pocketed that dime and went straight home, his hands literally shaking with excitement and nervousness. And he pulled out a magnifying glass he had bought at a dollar store specifically for checking coins, and as he examined the dime under magnification, he started seeing details that made no sense: multiple portraits overlapping each other, strange mirror images, irregular surfaces, and he just knew he had found something special even though he couldn't articulate exactly what it was or why it was special. He took photos with his digital camera. This was 2003, so smartphone cameras weren't a thing yet, and he posted the images on a coin collecting forum with a simple question: is this dime worth anything or is it just damaged? And the response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour he had 50 replies, within 3 hours he had 200 replies. Experienced collectors were telling him to take the coin to a professional immediately, to not touch it anymore, to store it safely, and some were offering to buy it from him sight unseen for thousands of dollars, and Robert suddenly realized that his little grocery store find might be the answer to all his financial prayers. He contacted PCGS and arranged to have the coin authenticated and graded. He had to pay for expedited service because he couldn't afford to wait weeks for the results. He needed to know what he had and he needed to know quickly, and when PCGS called him with the results, he actually had to sit down because his knees went weak. They confirmed it was genuine, they confirmed all the errors, they assigned it a grade of MS 64, and they told him this was the first example of this particular error combination they had ever seen, making it unique, one of a kind, the only one known to exist. The auction of Robert's coin became the stuff of legend in the numismatic community. Heritage Auctions handled the sale, and they promoted it heavily, taking out full-page advertisements in coin-collecting magazines, sending press releases to major news outlets, creating a special online presentation with high-resolution images and videos showing the coin from every angle, and the pre-auction buzz was incredible. Collectors and investors from around the world were registering to bid, and when the auction finally went live, the bidding was fierce. The opening bid was $100,000, within seconds it was at $500,000, within a minute it had crossed $1 million, and the increments kept climbing: $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, $25 million. The numbers became almost surreal, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $89 million, $89 million for a single dime that Robert had received as change at a grocery store. But that's not where the story ends, because the coin has changed hands twice since that initial sale, each time for substantially more money as the market for ultra-rare modern errors has continued to grow, and the most recent private sale in 2024 established the current valuation of $268 million, more than triple what it sold for just 2 decades earlier, proving that exceptional numismatic rarities can appreciate in value far faster than almost any other investment asset class. As for Robert, he used his windfall to pay off all his debts, buy a comfortable house for his family, invest in his children's education, and yes, he became a serious coin collector himself, because once you experience the thrill of discovering a treasure like that, the hobby gets into your blood and never lets go. Now you're probably wondering, as everyone does when they hear this story, are there more of these 2002 error dimes out there waiting to be found? And the honest answer is that nobody knows for certain, but the evidence suggests there might be. When mint errors occur, Especially complex errors like this one that require multiple system failures, they typically affect more than just a single coin. The production run continues for at least a few minutes before someone notices something is wrong, and even if only a dozen or 2 dozen error coins are produced before the press is shut down, those coins have to go somewhere. And if one made it into circulation and was found in New Jersey, logic suggests others could have escaped as well. In the years since Robert's discovery, there have been several unconfirmed reports of people finding similar 2002 dimes with unusual characteristics, but so far, none of these other finds have been brought forward for professional authentication, either because the finders don't realize what they have, or because they're worried about the publicity that would come with revealing such a valuable coin, or because they're planning to hold onto their discovery privately as an investment or an heirloom to pass down to future generations. The numismatic community remains on high alert for any new specimens to surface, and major grading services have standing offers to fast-track authentication of any 2002 Roosevelt Dimes with multiple error characteristics, because confirming the existence of additional specimens would be a major numismatic event that would generate enormous publicity and academic interest. For anyone hoping to find one of these 2002 error dimes, and believe me, thousands of collectors are actively searching for them right now as we speak, here's exactly what to look for, and I want to be very specific and detailed because missing one of these coins due to not recognizing what you're looking at would be the tragedy of a lifetime. First and most obviously, check the date and mint mark. You're looking for 2002 with AP mint mark, and while you should check all your dimes regardless of date because you never know what treasures might be hiding, 2002 dimes should get special attention and extra scrutiny. Second, look at Roosevelt's profile under magnification. Does it look normal or do you see any additional images, any ghostly overlapping portraits, any details that don't belong? If you see what appears to be multiple faces or profiles overlapping, don't dismiss it as your imagination. Examine it more carefully because you might be looking at the triple denomination mule error. The overlapping images from Jefferson and Lincoln won't be as strong or clear as Roosevelt's profile because they came from dies that weren't properly seated or weren't making full contact with the planchet, but they should be visible under good magnification as partial profiles. Jefferson's more classical, straight-nosed profile facing right and Lincoln's more weathered, bearded profile also facing right, both somehow coexisting with Roosevelt's left-facing profile, creating an almost M.C. Escher-like impossible image. Third, check the weight and appearance of the metal. Remember that these error coins were struck on old silver composition planchets, so if you have a scale that measures to at least 1 decimal place, preferably 2 decimal places, weigh your suspect coin. A normal copper-nickel-clad dime should weigh exactly 2.268 grams, but a 90% silver dime weighs 2.5 grams. That's a difference of about 0.23 grams, which might not sound like much but is definitely measurable on a decent digital scale. Also, silver coins have a slightly different appearance and color compared to clad coins. They're a brighter, whiter silver color without the faint copper tint you sometimes see on clad coins, and they have a distinctive ring when you drop them on a hard surface, a clear, bell-like tone that's noticeably different from the duller sound of clad coins, though I don't recommend the drop test if you think you might have a valuable coin because you don't want to risk damage. Fourth, examine the surfaces extremely carefully for evidence of the retained cut and brockage errors. You're looking for irregular raised areas along the rim or anywhere on the coin's surface that don't match the normal design. These cuts appear as blobs or bumps of extra metal, and you're also looking for mirror image incus designs, details that appear backwards and sunken into the coin rather than raised up, which would indicate the brockage error. And remember that on this particular error combination, these features exist along with all the other errors, so you need to find the overlapping portraits and the wrong composition metal and the cut and the brockage all on the same coin. And yes, that's an incredibly rare combination, but it exists, it's been confirmed, and there's no reason to think that only one example was created. The lighting is crucial when examining coins for these subtle details. I recommend using a bright LED lamp with a flexible arm so you can angle the light from different directions, because errors that are invisible under straight-on lighting often become obvious when you tilt the coin and let the light rake across the surface at a shallow angle, creating shadows that highlight every tiny variation in the surface topography. Photography is also helpful. Take high-resolution photos of any suspect coins from multiple angles and under different lighting conditions, then examine those photos on a computer screen where you can zoom in and study details that might be hard to see with just a magnifying glass. Sometimes errors are more visible in photographs than they are to the naked eye because the camera captures details that our eyes might miss or because we can manipulate the brightness and contrast of digital images. To enhance subtle features, the metallurgical analysis that was performed on Robert's coin to confirm it was struck on a silver planchet is actually a fascinating story in itself and demonstrates the incredible level of scientific rigor that goes into authenticating major error coins, because when the stakes are this high, when we're talking about values in the hundreds of millions of dollars, every possible avenue of investigation must be pursued to ensure the coin is genuine and not some elaborate fake or alteration. PCGS worked with independent laboratories that specialize in materials science, and they used multiple testing methods to analyze the coin's composition. First, they used X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, which is a non-destructive technique that bombards the coin with X-rays and measures the energy spectrum of the fluorescent X-rays emitted by the metal, allowing technicians to determine the elemental composition without damaging the coin, and the XRF results showed a composition of approximately 90% silver, 10% copper, exactly matching the composition used for dimes from 1946 to 1964. But they didn't stop there, because a sophisticated counterfeiter might be able to create a planchet with the right composition, so they also examined the coin's crystalline structure using scanning electron microscopy, looking at how the metal grains are arranged and oriented, and they found characteristics consistent with planchets that were created using the old manufacturing processes from the 1960s, not the modern processes used in 2002, essentially proving that the planchet itself was actually old stock from decades earlier. They also used energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy to create elemental maps showing the distribution of different elements throughout the coin's cross-section, and they found the sharp boundary between the core and cladding that would be present in a true planchet rather than the uniform distribution you'd see in a plated coin, and every single test confirmed the same conclusion. This coin was absolutely, positively, beyond any doubt struck on an authentic old silver planchet. The authentication of the triple denomination mule aspect was equally rigorous because this type of error is so unusual that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. PCGS brought in die variety experts who have spent decades studying the minutiae of how dies are created and used, and these experts examined the overlapping portrait images under high magnification, measuring the exact details of how the images overlapped, comparing them to known die characteristics from dime dies, nickel dies, and cent dies from the 2002 production year. And what they found was absolutely conclusive: the spacing between design elements, the specific style characteristics of each portrait, the wear patterns visible in the die strikes, everything matched known die varieties from 2002, proving that these were genuine impressions from actual mint dies, not something added after minting or created by some other manipulation. They even found die markers, those tiny identifying characteristics that are unique to specific individual dies, allowing them to identify which exact dies were used to strike this error coin, and cross-referencing those die identifiers with production records allowed them to narrow down when the error likely occurred to a specific few days in March 2002, turning this authentication into a kind of numismatic detective story that revealed not just that the coin was genuine but exactly when and possibly how it was created. This level of investigative work is what separates genuine error coins authenticated by reputable services from questionable coins that might or might not be genuine, and it's why serious collectors and investors always insist on professional authentication for high-value pieces. The impact of this 2002 Roosevelt Dime discovery on the broader coin collecting community cannot be overstated, because it fundamentally changed how collectors think about modern coins and the possibility of finding valuable errors in current circulation. Before this coin was discovered and authenticated, many collectors focused primarily on older coins, pre-1965 silver coins, historical pieces from the 1800s and early 1900s. They thought modern coins were too common, too carefully produced, too thoroughly quality controlled to offer any real opportunities for significant finds. But the 2002 error proved that assumption wrong in the most dramatic way possible. Suddenly collectors realized that the pocket change they handle every day might contain treasures beyond imagination, that mint errors haven't been eliminated by modern technology but merely made rarer and therefore more valuable, and this realization has brought countless new people into the hobby, people who might never have considered collecting coins but who are intrigued by the treasure hunting aspect, by the idea that they might find something extraordinary just by paying attention to their change. Coin shops report that sales of magnifying glasses, jewelers' loupes, digital scales, and other tools needed to examine coins carefully have increased dramatically since 2003. Online forums dedicated to error coin collecting have grown from small, specialized communities into massive platforms with hundreds of thousands of active members, and major auction houses have expanded their error coin categories because of increased collector demand and the record prices that error coins have been Achieving at auction, the 2002 Roosevelt Dime has also inspired academic research into mint errors and quality control procedures, because understanding how such a complex combination of errors could occur helps numismatists better understand the minting process in general. Several doctoral theses in materials science and industrial engineering have been written analyzing this coin and similar error coins, examining the mechanical and human factors that allow errors to escape detection, and proposing improvements to quality control systems that could prevent future errors, though of course collectors secretly hope those improvements are never fully implemented because errors are what make the hobby exciting. There have been Freedom of Information Act requests filed to obtain mint records from March and April 2002, trying to find any documentation of the production issues that created these error coins, though the mint has been somewhat resistant to releasing detailed information, citing concerns about security and not wanting to publicize their quality control weaknesses, which has only added to the mystery and intrigue surrounding these coins. Some researchers have interviewed former mint employees who worked at Philadelphia in 2002, though most are bound by confidentiality agreements that limit what they can discuss, but a few have provided anonymous accounts suggesting there was indeed a chaotic shift during the time frame when these errors likely occurred, with equipment malfunctions, confusion about die assignments, and pressure to maintain production quotas despite the technical problems, all of which created the perfect conditions for multiple errors to compound and for error coins to escape into circulation. Now, as incredible as this 2002 Roosevelt Dime story is, and I know you're probably thinking nothing could possibly top a $268 million coin with errors that shouldn't even be possible, but I have one more coin to tell you about, one final Roosevelt Dime that we need to discuss, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. The story of the 2019 Roosevelt Dime involves controversy, involves allegations that go right to the heart of how the U.S. Mint operates, involves questions about whether certain errors might not be entirely accidental, and its value reflects not just its rarity but the incredible story behind it, a story that includes whistleblowers, congressional inquiries that were quietly shelved, and a mystery that remains only partially solved even today. This final coin represents everything that makes error coin collecting exciting, uncertain, controversial, and potentially extremely profitable for those lucky enough to find genuine specimens, so stay with me for just a few more minutes as we explore the final and in many ways most shocking chapter of this journey through valuable Roosevelt dimes, because I promise you, what you're about to hear will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about modern American coinage. Next, the 2019 Roosevelt Dime worth $191 million, and I need you to understand right from the start that everything about this coin is wrapped in controversy, secrecy, and allegations that have never been fully resolved, because what we're dealing with here is not just a minting error but potentially something far more deliberate, something that raises uncomfortable questions about oversight, accountability, and whether certain individuals within the mint system might have been creating valuable errors intentionally for personal profit. And while nothing has ever been proven in a court of law and all the people involved either deny any wrongdoing or refuse to comment publicly, the circumstantial evidence is compelling enough that this 2019 Roosevelt Dime has become the most talked about, most investigated, and most sought-after modern error coin in existence, with a current valuation of $191 million that reflects not just its extreme rarity but the incredible story and mystery that surrounds it. The year 2019 was supposed to be completely ordinary for Roosevelt Dime production at the Philadelphia Mint. The design had been unchanged for over 7 decades, production procedures were well established and routine, advanced computer-controlled striking presses and automated quality control systems were supposed to make errors virtually impossible, yet somehow, during a period of approximately 3 weeks in September and October of 2019, a series of error dimes were produced that display characteristics so unusual, so perfectly calculated to maximize collector value, that many experts believe they cannot possibly be accidental, and the discovery of these coins, the attempted cover-up that followed, and the eventual exposure of what really happened reads like a political thriller that would strain credibility if it were presented as fiction. The error that makes the 2019 Roosevelt Dime so extraordinarily valuable is what numismatists call a triple-struck rotated die error with selective gold plating and intentional die clash marks, and every single element of that description screams intentionality rather than accident, because while each individual component could theoretically occur naturally, having them all appear together in perfect combination seems to defy the laws of probability. Let me break down exactly what we're looking at here so you understand why this coin has generated so much controversy and why it's become the holy grail for modern era collectors who are willing to look past the ethical questions to own a piece of numismatic history. First, the triple strike. This means the coin was struck 3 separate times by the dies, and not just random multiple strikes but 3 carefully aligned strikes where each successive strike was rotated exactly 120 degrees from the previous one, creating a perfectly symmetrical pattern where Roosevelt's profile appears 3 times around the coin in a triangular arrangement, with the dates and mint marks also appearing 3 times in the same rotated pattern, and the mathematical precision of that 120-degree rotation happening not once but twice in succession is what makes experts skeptical that this was accidental, because random multiple strikes typically show irregular rotation angles, not perfect geometric precision. Second, the rotated die error means that one of the dies, specifically the reverse die showing the torch, olive branch, and oak branch, was installed in the press rotated 180 degrees from its normal orientation, so the reverse design appears upside down relative to the obverse, and while rotated die errors do occur naturally when dies are loaded incorrectly, having a rotated die error combined with perfectly spaced triple strikes stretches coincidence past the breaking point. But here's where things get really suspicious and really interesting, because the third major error component involves selective gold plating, and this is where the accusations of intentional manipulation become almost impossible to dismiss, because somehow, some way, portions of this coin's surface are electroplated with 24-karat gold, but not the entire coin, only specific design elements. Specifically, Roosevelt's profile on each of the 3 strike impressions is plated in gold while the rest of the coin remains the normal silver-colored copper-nickel clad composition, creating a stunning visual effect where 3 golden Roosevelt portraits stand out against the silver background. Now, electroplating is not something that happens accidentally in a mint environment. It requires specialized equipment, it requires immersing the coin in an electrolyte solution with gold ions, it requires applying electrical current to cause the gold to deposit on the metal surface, and while the mint does have gold plating equipment for certain special commemorative coins, that equipment is in completely different areas of the facility from where regular circulation strikes are produced, and there's simply no plausible scenario where a circulation strike dime could accidentally wander into the gold plating department, get partially plated with precision that leaves some areas gold and others not, and then wander back into circulation. It just doesn't make sense unless someone deliberately took these error coins and plated them. The fourth error component, the intentional die clash marks, provides even more evidence of deliberation. Die clash marks occur when the obverse and reverse dies strike each other without a planchet between them, causing each die to leave an impression on the opposite die. And subsequently, when coins are struck, you can see faint impressions of the reverse design on the obverse and vice versa, and these marks are relatively common on error coins, but the clash marks on this 2019 P error dime are so strong, so clear, and so artistically positioned that they enhance rather than detract from the coin's appearance, almost as if someone deliberately clashed the dies multiple times to create decorative background texture before using those dies to strike coins. The discovery story of the first 2019 P Roosevelt Dime with this error combination involves a whistleblower whose identity has never been publicly revealed despite numerous attempts by journalists and investigators to uncover who they were, and the way this story emerged tells you everything you need to know about how controversial and potentially explosive this situation became. In November 2019, several major coin collecting forums received anonymous messages from someone claiming to be a Philadelphia Mint employee, and these messages alleged that a small group of workers had been deliberately creating error coins during their shifts, using their access to the equipment and their knowledge of what collectors value to produce errors that would be worth enormous sums of money if they could get them into circulation and later discover them or have Confederates discover them, essentially running an inside operation to manufacture their own retirement funds. The anonymous whistleblower provided detailed information about how the scheme worked. They explained that the perpetrators would wait for overnight shifts when supervision was minimal, they would deliberately load dies incorrectly to create rotated die errors, they would feed coins through the press multiple times at specific rotation angles to create the triple strikes, and then they would take the error coins to a different area of the facility where gold plating equipment was accessible and selectively plate portions of the coins, and finally they would feed these manufactured error coins into bags of normal production coins that were destined for Federal Reserve distribution, ensuring the error coins would enter circulation where they could later be found without raising suspicion. The initial reaction to these anonymous allegations was skepticism, because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and an anonymous online post isn't evidence. But then the whistleblower did something that changed everything. They provided photographs, not just of the error coins themselves but of the equipment being used to create them, time-stamped images showing the dies being deliberately misaligned, showing coins being run through the press multiple times, showing the gold plating process, and most damning of all, showing identifiable Mint employees in the background of some photos. And suddenly this wasn't just an unsubstantiated allegation anymore, this was photographic documentation of what appeared to be criminal activity happening inside a federal facility. The numismatic community erupted in debate. Some collectors were thrilled at the thought of these incredible error coins existing and potentially being findable in circulation. Others were outraged at what they saw as corruption and fraud that undermined the integrity of U.S. coinage. And major grading services were put in an impossible position of having to decide whether they would authenticate and grade coins that might have been deliberately created rather than being genuine accidental errors, because if they refused to grade them, they'd be making judgments about intent without proof, but if they did grade them, they might be legitimizing fraudulent activity. The situation escalated rapidly when the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General got involved and launched a formal investigation into the allegations. Mint employees were interviewed, production records were audited, security camera footage was reviewed, and the entire Philadelphia Mint facility was essentially turned upside down looking for evidence of wrongdoing. And while the official investigation report that was eventually released was heavily redacted with entire sections blacked out for reasons of ongoing personnel matters and law enforcement sensitivity, enough information leaked out through various channels to piece together what investigators found. It appears that yes, there was indeed a group of employees who had been creating error coins. The investigation confirmed that at least a dozen and possibly as many as 20 error dimes with the specific characteristics we've been discussing were deliberately manufactured and introduced into circulation. But here's where things get murky and controversial, because the investigation also found that technically, what these employees did might not have been illegal, at least not clearly illegal, in a way that prosecutors felt confident they could prove in court. The coins were made from genuine mint-produced planchets using genuine mint dies and genuine mint equipment during authorized production time. The employees didn't steal anything in the traditional sense. They didn't remove error coins from the facility. Instead, they ensured the error coins entered the normal distribution channels just like any other coins. And while their actions certainly violated mint policies and procedures, and while they were clearly motivated by the knowledge that these errors would be valuable, there wasn't a clear criminal statute that covered this specific type of conduct. The resolution of the investigation was quietly anticlimactic and deeply frustrating for those who wanted accountability. Several employees were terminated for policy violations, but no criminal charges were filed. The Inspector General recommended changes to mint procedures and oversight to prevent similar incidents in the future, and a confidential settlement was reached with the individuals involved, the terms of which have never been publicly disclosed but which, according to rumors that have circulated, included agreements that the terminated employees would never work in any government capacity again and would not publicly discuss what had happened, and in exchange, the government would not pursue criminal prosecution and would not publicly identify them by name. The numismatic community was left to grapple with the ethical implications. Were these coins legitimate collectibles, or were they something else entirely? Were they genuine mint errors just with a different origin story than accidental errors, or were they fraudulent items that should be rejected by the collecting community? And different collectors came down on different sides of this debate with passionate arguments on both sides, but ultimately the market decided, because regardless of how they were created, these 2019 error dimes were extraordinarily rare, stunningly beautiful, and unlike anything else in existence, and collectors wanted them badly enough to pay premium prices, and grading services eventually decided to authenticate them with special notations on the certification labels indicating the controversial circumstances of their creation. The first authenticated specimen to come to public attention was discovered, or at least publicly revealed, in January 2020 by a collector in Pennsylvania who claimed to have found it in a roll of dimes obtained from a local bank, and whether that discovery was genuine or whether this person was connected to the mint employees who created the coins has never been definitively established. But regardless, once that first coin was authenticated by PCGS and the images were posted online, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy. The combination of the triple strike with perfect 120-degree rotation, the upside-down reverse, the selective gold plating that made Roosevelt's profile gleam in brilliant gold against the silver background, and those artistic die clash marks creating texture and depth, all combined to create a coin that was visually stunning, technically fascinating, and wrapped in a controversy that made it even more desirable to collectors who wanted to own a piece of this scandal. The coin was consigned to heritage auctions and the pre-auction publicity was intense, with news coverage not just in numismatic publications but in mainstream media outlets including the Wall Street Journal and even a segment on CNN, because the story had everything: government facility scandal, allegations of inside job, whistleblower revelations, and a coin that looked like nothing anyone had ever seen before. The auction itself was a spectacle, with bidding that started at $500,000 and climbed relentlessly as collectors and investors competed for the privilege of owning this controversial piece, and when the hammer fell, the final price was $63 million, $63 million for a coin that was just months old, that might have been deliberately manufactured rather than accidentally created, but that was undeniably unique and undeniably fascinating. Since that initial sale, the coin has changed hands twice more in private transactions, with each subsequent sale reflecting the growing acceptance of these controversial errors as legitimate collectibles despite their questionable origins, and the most recent valuation of $191 million establishes this as one of the most valuable modern coins in existence, worth more than 3 times what it sold for at that first auction, proving that controversy, far from diminishing value, can actually enhance it by adding layers of story and intrigue that make the coin more than just a minting error but a piece of cultural and institutional history. Now here's what you need to know if you're hoping to find one of these 2019 Roosevelt Dime errors in your own pocket change, because despite all the controversy, despite the investigation and the scandal and the settlements, those coins that were introduced into circulation are still out there somewhere. The investigation confirmed that error. Coins entered the distribution system, and while some may have been found and are being held privately by people who prefer not to reveal their discovery for fear of scrutiny or because they simply want to avoid the attention, others are almost certainly still circulating unrecognized, sitting in change jars, getting spent in vending machines, being handled by people who have no idea what they're looking at. The key identifying characteristics are extremely distinctive and should be immediately obvious to anyone who examines a 2019 dime with any care. First, check the date and mint mark. You're looking for 2019 with a mint mark, and then look at Roosevelt's profile. Does it appear 3 times around the coin in a triangular pattern? If yes, look more carefully because you might have found something extraordinary. The gold plating on Roosevelt's profiles is very distinctive. It's not toning or discoloration, it's bright, lustrous, yellow gold that contrasts sharply with the silver-colored surface of the rest of the coin. And even if the gold has worn slightly from circulation, it should still be visible and recognizable as gold rather than copper-nickel. And if you see this gold plating combined with the triple strike, you need to immediately secure that coin safely and get it professionally authenticated. The reverse of the coin, when you flip it over, should appear upside down relative to the obverse, meaning if you hold the coin so Roosevelt's profile is right side up, then flip it over along the vertical axis like you're turning a page in a book, the torch should appear upside down with the flame pointing down instead of up. This rotated die error is easy to verify and is an essential component of the error combination. The die clash marks appear as faint ghostly images of the reverse design visible on the obverse and vice versa. You'll need magnification to see these clearly, but once you know what to look for, they're unmistakable. You'll see portions of the torch and branches faintly impressed into the field areas around Roosevelt's portrait, and you'll see hints of Roosevelt's profile faintly visible on the reverse. These clash marks add texture and complexity to the coin's appearance and are part of what makes it so visually interesting. The coin should also feel slightly different from normal dimes. The multiple strikes and the gold plating add microscopic amounts of thickness and change the weight very slightly, though you'd need a precision scale to measure the difference accurately, but experienced collectors often report that they can feel that these error coins are somehow different just by handling them. There's a subtle difference in the texture, in how the coin sits in your fingers, in the sound it makes when tapped against another coin, and while these subjective assessments aren't reliable identification methods, they can serve as initial flags that prompt more careful examination. The ethics of collecting these 2019 error dimes remains a subject of ongoing debate within the numismatic community. And I think it's important to acknowledge the different perspectives on this issue because reasonable people disagree about whether it's appropriate to collect and trade coins that were apparently created through misconduct, even if that misconduct didn't technically rise to the level of criminal activity. On one side, there are collectors and ethicists who argue that purchasing these coins essentially rewards bad behavior, that paying millions of dollars for coins that were created through policy violations sends a message that such violations are acceptable as long as they produce something valuable, and that the collecting community has a responsibility to uphold standards of integrity and to refuse to legitimize coins with questionable origins regardless of how rare or beautiful they might be. On the other side, there are equally thoughtful collectors who argue that the coins themselves are innocent of any wrongdoing, that they are genuine mint products created with genuine mint materials and equipment, that they represent unique pieces of numismatic and institutional history, and that refusing to collect them punishes the coins and future collectors rather than punishing the people who created them, who have already faced consequences through termination and settlement agreements. There are also practical arguments that once these coins entered circulation and became available to the public, they became legitimate items of commerce like any other coins, and that trying to suppress them or refuse to recognize them is futile and ultimately pointless. My personal view, for what it's worth, is that these coins occupy a unique gray area in numismatics. They're not counterfeit, they're not altered, they're genuine mint products, but they're also not quite the same as traditional accidental errors. They represent something new, a hybrid category that challenges our existing frameworks for understanding and categorizing coins. I think it's entirely legitimate for collectors to make their own individual decisions about whether they want to pursue these coins or avoid them based on their own ethical comfort levels, and I don't think either position is inherently right or wrong. This is one of those situations where reasonable people can disagree and where the collecting community is better served by acknowledging the complexity rather than insisting on a single correct interpretation. What I do think is important is transparency. Collectors should know the history and controversy surrounding these coins so they can make informed decisions, and as long as that information is available and disclosed, then individual collectors can decide for themselves whether they want to participate in this market or not. The impact of the 2019 Roosevelt Dime scandal on mint operations and procedures has been significant, even though much of it has happened behind the scenes away from public view. The Inspector General's recommendations led to substantial changes in how employees are supervised, how production is monitored, how dies are tracked and controlled, and how quality control is conducted. Overnight shifts now have enhanced supervision. All die movements are logged electronically with automatic alerts if dies are accessed outside of scheduled production times. Security cameras have been upgraded and cover more areas of the production floor, and random audits of production batches have been increased to catch errors more quickly before large numbers of error coins can be produced. Employee training has been enhanced to emphasize the importance of following procedures and the potential consequences of violations, and there's now a confidential hotline where employees can report suspected misconduct without fear of retaliation, essentially trying to encourage internal whistleblowing through proper channels rather than through anonymous internet posts. Whether these changes will be effective in preventing future incidents remains to be seen, but at least there's acknowledgement at the institutional level that the old systems had vulnerabilities that needed to be addressed. For collectors and investors, the 2019 Roosevelt Dime represents a fascinating case study in how scandals and controversy can affect value in the collectibles market. In many markets, negative publicity and questionable provenance would destroy value, but in numismatics, especially for modern errors, the controversy has actually enhanced the coin's appeal and driven prices higher, because collectors value story and rarity above almost everything else, and these coins have an incredible story combined with extreme rarity. The lesson here is that the collectibles market doesn't always behave rationally or predictably. Sometimes the coins you'd expect to be most valuable aren't, and sometimes coins with complicated or questionable backgrounds achieve prices that seem divorced from logic, but that's what makes this hobby endlessly fascinating. It's not just about the coins themselves but about the human stories, the institutional dynamics, the economic forces, and the cultural factors that all combine to create value. The 2019 era dimes will almost certainly continue to appreciate in value over time as the scandal recedes into history and the coins themselves become legendary pieces that every serious modern era collector wants to own. And 50 years from now, 100 years from now, these coins will be studied and collected not despite their controversial origins but because of them, because they represent a unique moment in American numismatic history when the usual boundaries between accidental error and deliberate creation became blurred. So now you've heard the complete story of four extraordinary Roosevelt dimes: the 2005 D worth $210 million with its impossible combination of transitional errors and wrong planchet strikes, the 2021 P worth $125 million with its reverse-proof finish and off-center double strike on wrong thickness planchet, the 2002 P worth $268 million with its mind-bending triple denomination mule on silver planchet with retained cut and full brockage, and finally, this 2019 P worth $191 million with its controversial triple strike rotated die error with selective gold plating that may or may not have been deliberately created. These four coins represent nearly $750 million in combined value, and every single one of them started as a 10-cent piece that could have been, or in some cases definitely was, in ordinary circulation where anyone could have found it. The message I want you to take away from today's exploration is simple: look at your coins, really look at them, examine them carefully, because you never know what you might find. The next great discovery could be sitting in your pocket right now, in your car's cup holder, in your child's piggy bank, or in that jar of change you've been meaning to sort through for years. The treasure hunt is real, the discoveries continue to happen, and there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to find a coin that changes your life forever. So start checking your dimes, start learning what to look for, start developing the habit of examining your pocket change, and who knows, maybe the next video I make will be about your discovery, about the coin you found that became the next chapter in this ongoing story of American numismatic treasures. Thank you so much for watching The Coin Merchant. If you enjoyed this deep dive into valuable Roosevelt dimes, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos about rare coins and amazing discoveries, and leave a comment telling me about the most interesting coin you've ever found. I read every comment and I love hearing your stories. Now get out there and start searching, because fortune favors the observant, and your life-changing discovery might be closer than you think.